Now, would you like to go to space? It's never been easier to potentially go to space, provided that you're a multi-millionaire prepared to give a billionaire enough money for them to put you in their big phallic rockets and wave you about in the upper atmosphere. But back in the 80s, you could, if you lived in a movie world and were Joaquin Phoenix, go into space with a much more modest income, provided you were the victim of some gross negligence from NASA, which is obviously much better. I am, of course, referring to cinematic megaflop Space Camp, a suggestion by one Sir Larry Bundy Jr., the master of obscure game facts, who has kindly provided this idea for the games based on flop movie series. The reason he suggested it was that Space Camp had a video game, and being typical Larry Bundy Jr. is a fairly obscure one, never released outside of Japan, on a computer that was fairly popular outside of Japan, South America, Spain and the Netherlands. That's our Larry, all right. Space Camp is the tale of 5 school-aged kids going on a summer holiday jaunt to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. They are there to learn about the NASA space program, but also to mimic some of the astronaut training. That sounds like a hoot, doesn't it? Well, it does until the predictable disaster unfurls. The youngest member, Max, befriends a sentient robot called Jinx, something I'm not too sure that NASA has even to this day. After a series of incidents occur that threatens the gang's chumminess, you know, the sort of incidents, teenagers getting horny, institutionalised sexism, that kind of thing. Well, it all upsets everyone, and Jinx tries to cheer up his best pal Max by giving him his one biggest wish, which is to go into space. This generous act basically puts all of the teens in a big space rocket and launches them beyond the stratosphere with only 3 weeks of very peripheral NASA training to get them home. Can they overcome their differences and land the shuttle back on terra firma? Yes, of course they can. It's a kids' movie. They're not going to end the movie with a scene of their panicked faces screaming as they float off into the infinite void of space. Space Camp had all of the ingredients to be a successful cinematic stew. The cast features some of the most popular young actors of the time. You've got Kate Capshaw, Steven Spielberg's ex, most famous as somehow being even more irritating than Data from the Goonies in the Temple of Doom film. You've got Kelly Preston, that's John Travolta's Mrs. R.I.P., who is in many major roles during her lifetime with Twins, Jerry Maguire and Nothing to Lose on her CV. Then you've got the great Leah Thompson, who put in a brilliant turn as the lusty mother of Marty McFly, an incestuous storyline that would go on to inspire most porn directors and scriptwriters for things like Pornhub. By the looks of it, how would I know that? I don't know. I know nothing, Your Honour. But her perversions didn't stop there, as she would go on to nearly shag a waterfowl in the great George Lucas adventure Howard the Duck. It's not a great movie, but it's not as bad as everyone says. Finally, you've got one Joaquin Phoenix, then known as just Leaf Phoenix, who was just 12 years old at the time. And we all know about him these days, and not even for bad reasons. He's a bloody good actor, isn't he? Space Camp even had a score written by the greatest living orchestral masterpiece sculptor himself, the musician John Williams. We all know him from Superman and Star Wars and whatnot. So how come, from a budget of $18 million, that it just managed to recoup $9.5 million at the US box office? Well, there was the rather lukewarm response from critics, with the average score on Rotten Tomatoes stuck at 46%. But that's not the full story. You see, Space Camp was released in June 1986. That was just 5 months after the horrendous events of the Challenger accident that exploded above Cape Canaveral on January 28th, 1986, killing all 7 crew members on board. This surely must have led to a very difficult period of pre-release marketing for Fox for the already completed movie. As a parent, you probably wouldn't have been so keen on little Chet or Tori fueling their aspirations of becoming an astronaut one day after seeing the horror unfold in the Florida skies a couple of seasons beforehand. Moving on swiftly from the awkwardness of tragedy to the trivial silliness that is video games. Whew, I was out my wheelhouse then, wasn't I? Crikey. Like I said in the intro, Space Camp was only released in Japan, courtesy of the Packin Video Company, who programmed and published this title on the MSX. Packin Video Company are a company that have endured throughout the decades in various forms as both a publisher and a developer under various names like Victor Interactive and Marvelous Interactive. They've published a lot of Japanese and Western releases in the Land of the Rising Sun, but they were also the programming team behind the Harvest Moon franchise for Natsume. Space Camp finds the young crew already in space with all the subplots about teenage hormones and career sexism completely sidelined in favour of a game about steering a spaceship around in space. And quite rightly so for a mid-80s computer game. I'm not even sure how you'd program a game about male privilege in the 1980s on an MSX. I mean, I guess it's possible. I'm not sure how that would appeal to children. The first stage finds the teens in their shuttle being besieged by all sorts of space junk in orbit. Satellites, radioactive meatballs, used tampons, and bottle openers are thrown at our spacefaring youngsters. And maybe I've got those objects wrong, but we do need, as a race, to stop polluting our upper atmosphere with used sanitary products. So let's take these lessons as they come, please. Young ladies, stop aiming your tampons up into space when you wish to remove them. Space Camp's first level has you gliding up the screen in the style of a vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up. Only just like the real NASA space shuttles, you aren't packing ordnance to swat away all the cosmic debris in your way. Instead, you have to dodge them like a cabinet minister would have to dodge questions about Boris Johnson's behaviour, securing oxygen and fuel in your ever-diminishing meters via the acquisition of oxygen bottles and fuel canisters left on various massive and very close together space stations. The game's core mechanic comes into play here, the same control scheme that continues throughout the game. It is a lunar lander type effort that will have you steering your craft with thrusts that use your energy reserves and see you propelled indefinitely in that direction because of zero gravity. The next sequence places you in the spacesuit of young Max as he spacewalks out of the relative safety of his rocket for a spacewalk on the exterior of a space station. The movement here is a little bit freer, with our one-day Joker-to-be drifting across a flip-screen environment, grabbing the aforementioned oxygen and fuel tanks, along with batteries, lights, one-ups, and space diamonds hidden under access panels. Certain panels will let you access hidden treasure rooms full of points and vital resources, though you may find your view obscured if you haven't brought enough light bulbs with you. It's all dark in there. Now, I wouldn't put those diamonds in your pocket, Hackwin. You'll tear a hole in your suit and you'll suffocate. Leave those things alone, they're too sharp. You're troubled in this level by a close encounter of the worst kind, as horrible monocular alien beasts lurk under panels that sap your energy and then explode in a puff of, fuel? They're not in the movie, no, if you're wondering. Also aboard the space station are some of Jinx's robot brethren, and what a bunch of womb openings these chaps are. They don't cause you physical damage as such, but what they do is follow you around like a lost puppy in a post-apocalyptic war zone. This is mildly aggravating most of the time, but in the tight walled environment of a treasure room, they can literally block you in an enclave until your oxygen slowly expires, which is absolutely horrifying if you think about it too long. Remember, this is a 12-year-old child, scared and alone, fighting for his last breath as he's pushed against a wall by a callous robot, fighting for his last breath in the loneliest environment possible, the endless black ocean of space. Once the spacewalk section is done, You get another shuttle section where you have to steer through an asteroid field, but I really can't go into detail in this as I have barely any footage of it. Sorry. I really quite enjoyed this rather simple, yet not very true to the source material space adventure. It is a shame that it wasn't converted to the other 8-bit formats of the time really, as I think it probably would have been fairly fondly remembered. For that to have happened, it's very likely that the film would have had to have been a runaway success, and maybe without the tragic events of the Challenger disaster, it could have been, regardless of the critical reviews. Still, I quite like Space Camp then. It has all the fun of the multi-billionaire. But don't think you could go and buy Twitter after playing it. Like, subscribe, and K thanks, bye.